First session this morning, we're going to be talking about growing yourself. And I'm going to be basing it on this particular scripture, Luke chapter 2, verse 52. So next slide for me, Joshua, if you can. If you have a Bible with you, and I hope you have, I want you to turn to Luke chapter 2. And we'll start reading at verse 41 and read a couple of passages there. Okay? So this morning we're going to look at growing self, and in this afternoon we'll have a little bit of a chat about how we can help and grow our teams if we're involved in teams, all right? So those are the themes I've been given today, and hopefully they'll help you. I know the timeline's blown out a little bit, but hopefully we'll do a little bit of practical work as well a little bit later on in each session. So Luke chapter 2, verse 41, and it says this: Every year Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. When he was 12 years old, they went up to the festival according to the custom. After the festival was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but they were unaware of it. Thinking he was in their company, they traveled on for a day. Then they began looking for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone who had heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. His mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you." "Why were you searching for me?" he asked. "Didn't you know that I had to be in my father's house?" But they did not understand what he was saying to them. Then he went down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. But his mother treasured all these things in her heart. And Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. And if you've got your Bible open, just jump down to verse 21 of chapter 3. So verse 21 of chapter 3, and it says this: When all the people were being baptized, Jesus was baptized too. And as he was praying, heaven was opened, and the Holy Spirit descended on him in bodily form like a dove. And a voice came from heaven: "You are my Son, whom I love. With you I am well pleased." Now Jesus himself was about 30 years old when he began his ministry. He was the son, so it was thought, of Joseph. Okay, can you put the next slide up for me, Joshua? This is the verse we're going to concentrate on in this particular session. And it's very, very important in the life and ministry of Jesus. One of the great challenges when it comes to looking at Jesus for any teaching and inspiration for our lives is that it's Jesus. And so the tendency is Jesus is different. Jesus is separate from us. And therefore, it's hard to draw lessons from the life of Jesus that apply to someone like me, because Jesus was God and I'm not. Therefore, the stuff that Jesus does, he does because he's God. And therefore, not really like a human being like me. Now, I totally understand that idea, but Dr. Luke in his gospel, what he tries to do really cleverly is show us the human Jesus. So he doesn't deny that Jesus is God. That's a lock and load. That's there. He wants to show us an element of Jesus' life where his humanity shines through. And this comes over time and time again. So in the Gospel of Luke, if you compared Luke's gospel to the other gospels, Matthew, Mark, and John, the story we've just read is unique to Luke. No one else has that story. And I believe the reason he includes that story is because he's trying to teach us something about the development of Jesus and the growth of Jesus. Okay? And I want you to notice something very, very powerful here. At the end of chapter 2 of Luke, how old was Jesus? The end of chapter 2. 12. Okay. When we pick Jesus up at chapter 3, verse 21, how old is he? 30. So Dr. Luke gives us that detail. Now, anytime a writer gives you that sort of detail, he wants you to ask the question, why is that detail in? Why do we know that Jesus is 12 and now we know he's 30? What's going on there? There's an important reason for that detail. And actually, I want you to see something that between 252 and 321, there are 18 years of a gap. Okay? Now, we're not quite certain everything that Jesus did in that gap. We can make some educated guesses. We can put some of the clues together from the Gospels, and we can sort of roughly build a picture. But if we went on Dr. Luke's record, here's what we know for certain, and it's on the screen for you. We know absolutely for certain one thing that Jesus did in the gap. He grew. All right? Now, when you're reading the story of Jesus, the challenge is we're rushing to the sort of Instagram moments of Jesus' life, you know. So we're rushing to the moments when he gets baptized, the Holy Spirit comes, the miracles start. That's the exciting stuff. That's the stuff everybody loves. And the danger is this, rushing to the Instagram moment of Jesus' life, you miss this detail. So when Jesus starts his ministry at 30, it's not an accident that he got there. And he hasn't got there just because he's God, because that's the lazy Christian answer to this. Well, Jesus is ready to start his ministry at 30 because he's God in flesh. No, Dr. Luke tells us that Jesus gets there because he grew. And I want us to pause and look at this. Next slide for me, Joshua. So let's look at this idea of Jesus growing. If you read the Gospel of Luke, it's not the first time we've come across the word to grow. Okay? So the very first reference to growing in Dr. Luke's Gospel is chapter 1 and verse 80. Stick that up for me, good lad. And it says this, speaking of John, who became John the Baptist, it says this, and the child grew and became strong in spirit. So that's the first reference to growing. The second reference to growing in the Gospel is in chapter 2, verse 40. Can you put that up for me, Joshua? Good lad. And the child grew and became strong. Now, this time, that's speaking of Jesus. Okay? Now, if you look at those two verses, they're virtually identical, aren't they? They're virtually identical. So, you've got the child grew and became strong. The only difference between John as a child and Jesus as a child is that John, it says, became strong in spirit. Right? But they're virtually identical. The third reference to growing, 252. Thank you, Joshua. And it's this reference that we're looking at. So if you click on to the next slide for me, Joshua, it'll highlight the three growing words, okay? Now, when you read that, like for me, in my English version of the Bible, and I read 180, 240, and 252, the English reading of the Bible, it all looks like the same word. Is that okay? So I'm assuming the growing in 180 and the growing in 240 and the growing in 250, it's all the same. But actually, Dr. Luke does something really clever, which you can't see if I just read it with my English eyes, my English Bible. The only way I can crack the code is to go into Dr. Luke's language. And when I go into Dr. Luke's language, I discover that 180 and 240 are the same words. When he says the child grew, John, and the child grew, Jesus, same word. Now, you just got to trust me on this. The word points to this idea to grow naturally. So what's your name? Ken. Okay, so how old are you? 16. So healthy man, right? Yes. Good looking, handsome, clearly intelligent. And so now, if this man is just naturally healthy, as long as we keep feeding him, as long as we give him the right environment, he's going to grow. He will naturally, physically grow. That's the word in 180 and 240. That's the word being used. It's natural, normal, developmental growth. However, when it comes to Jesus in 252, Dr. Luke switches the word. He uses a different word for us, which is a very powerful one. Can you flick on to the next bit for me, Joshua? And the word, and again, just trust me on this, that Dr. Luke uses literally means this. If you were to literally translate the word, it means to forward cut. All right? In the language of Dr. Luke. Now, that doesn't make any sense to me in English. Some people have tried to explain it by putting this definition to beat forward, to lengthen out by hammering, or to increase. Now, again, that's not really helping me, and it's probably not helping you. So let me give you an illustration that explains this word. Let's pretend we go out for a walk together in the woods. We're on a path, and we're walking in our path. But we see a bit of the woods that we want to go to, but there's no path to it, right? So we decide we're going to go there, and we're going to make our own path. So we get our machetes out, because we carry those just in case. And we put our machetes out and we start to cut down the vegetation. And we make our own path to the other side. Okay, you with me? All right? Now, the act of making that path is the word that Dr. Luke uses there. It's like I am cutting a path deliberately and intentionally to somewhere. Are you with me now? Yes? You hear? Okay. So, next slide, Joshua. What the word really means is, when Dr. Luke uses this word in 252, here's what he's saying. Jesus here is not growing naturally. He's growing intentionally. He's growing deliberately. So when it says Jesus grew in wisdom, stature, favor with God, and favor with man, Dr. Luke is showing us that this is not an accident. This is deliberate. Jesus is deliberately growing in wisdom. He's deliberately growing in stature. He's deliberately growing in his relationship with his Father. And he's deliberately growing in his understanding and relationship with people. All right? So, if you apply that idea, it's an amazing thought. It means that when Jesus arrives at his Instagram moment, at Luke chapter 3, verse 21, and the Father speaks and the Holy Spirit comes, that moment is not an accident. That moment happens because he spent the previous 18 years growing into what God has for him. All right? Now, when it comes to Jesus, people think, well, Jesus is just ready at 30 because Jesus was God. Now, that is true. He was God, but that's a lazy answer. And actually, I'm passionately committed to trying to help people to grow. And I've got pushback for many, many years from people who say that self-leadership and self-growth is a world idea that we're imposing onto the church. And that's why, for me, 252 is the $64 million verse. It's the gold-plated verse, because here's what I teach people. If Jesus had to grow, and he was God. Okay, if Jesus had to grow, well, what's our excuse? All right? So actually, here's Jesus, God in flesh, and yet Dr. Luke tells us he made a deliberate and intentional decision to grow in 4 key areas. I was listening to your introductions, and it's lovely to hear people studying for A-levels and studying for this and studying for and doing this. Well, you know, if you're studying for your A-levels, you don't just get them. Wouldn't that be great? Just turn up. All right, I'll have 5, please. And A stars if possible. Okay, this man, Timothy, he's studying for a PhD. They don't just hand those out. Oh, we like you. You're a nice man, nice jumper. Here, there's a PhD. You can have that. No, that's 3, 4. I have a PhD. That's 4 years' work. Now, all people see is me walking across the stage with my funny dress on and my strange hat, getting that piece of paper, and they go, wow, what an amazing... What they haven't seen is 4 years of relentless commitment to learning and study and growth in order to get that moment. Now, we've no problem thinking about that in the natural. Here's Dr. Luke telling us that Jesus applied the same principle in the spiritual. Jesus didn't just arrive like zoomed down from heaven. He didn't just arrive at the Jordan because he was God. Dr. Luke tells us that between 12 years of age and 30 years of age, Jesus grew. And he grew deliberately. Are you with me? Now, that's a really important idea. I would suggest to you that will revolutionize your idea of Jesus. I absolutely believe he's fully God, so do not hear what I'm not saying. But I'm also completely blown away by the fact that he lived a fully human life. And I mean, an amazing idea. Jesus had to learn Hebrew, and he invented it. Do you understand? As God, he invented Hebrew. As a man, he had to learn the Hebrew alphabet. You know, he had to learn the Bible. He wrote the Bible. Do you know? And that messes with your brain. So as God, he is the Word. But as a man, he had to go to the house of learning, the local synagogue, and he had to literally learn the Bible. That's mind-blowing, right? And what Dr. Luke is teaching us about Jesus is this. There are no shortcuts to anywhere that's worth going. Not even Jesus took the shortcut. Jesus did not play the God card. Right? I don't need to go to school today because I'm God. Right? I don't need to learn how to cut stone or build a table because I invented stone. I made the trees. I don't need to turn up to work. So imagine giving his dad pushback. Well, I don't need to turn up to work today because I'm God. No. Jesus learned how to use those tools. Jesus learned how to cut stone. Jesus learned how to put pieces of wood together. Amazing idea. And I meet so many gorgeous Christians, and we're wanting to jump to the Instagram moment without the growing moment. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in the real world, and it doesn't happen in the biblical world. Are you with me? Yes? You sure? Okay. And if you can grab that idea, it's inspirational. It will transform your spirituality. So there's stuff in your life that only God can do, but there's other stuff you've got to do, and I've got to do. I mean, God's given me an amazing book. And this is the most amazing book I own. I have a wonderful library of many, many books. This is the only book I own with the breath of God in it. Right? Now, even though that's an amazing book, that's what God's given me, I have to read it. God doesn't just zap the information into my brain. There you are. Don't worry about it. Stay in bed. You don't need to read it. It's fine. I'll just zap you with truth. Come on. And this is a powerful idea for us. Next slide for me, Joshua. So, Jesus, how did he get so smart? The lazy answer is he got so smart because he was God. Luke teaches us, no, he got smart because he learned. Just keep clicking for me. The four things, that's it. Good lad. Well done. So, we've got Jesus grew in wisdom. We could call that IQ. And Jesus was really clever. Now, again, people will say, well, he's clever because he's God. I want to say, as a man, he was clever because he learned. Yes? Stature, he grew in stature. That means his physical well-being, his physical development. The word there can point to just physical maturity in a different context. In this context, it means Jesus took responsibility for his physicality. Do you know, Jesus was super fit. Super fit. And if you, I'm doing some of the teaching from this book. I'd love to be able to spend a session with you on each of these four things, because it will revolutionize your idea of what Jesus did and who Jesus is, and your view of Jesus, and then unpack how we could grow in all four of those areas. I'm doing a bit of an overview for you this morning. But in the book, I look at things like the fact, we talked about fasting. Jesus fasted for 40 days and 40 nights. That means he had to be physically pretty strong. Yeah. I know some people can't fast for 40 minutes. So 40 days and 40 nights. Yes, he was a carpenter or a tecton. That means he worked with wood and stone, which means he was probably physically fairly strong, probably very, very strong hands, strong arms, strong upper body, because he has to chop stuff down, he has to cut stone, he has to build things. Incredible. Jesus walked all over the country. Like a little bit of an idea from you. Nazareth to Capernaum. So Nazareth, the village Jesus grew up in, to Capernaum, the village that became his northern headquarters where Peter lived. That's 18 miles uphill the whole way. So when the Bible says, and Jesus went from Nazareth to Capernaum, it just feels like, you just walk around the corner to the shop. No, that's 18 miles. And I've been to both towns, Nazareth and Capernaum, and it's uphill the whole way. Nazareth, or Galilee, to Jerusalem is 120 miles. So Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Just sounds like, let's have a wee walk to Jerusalem. No, it's 120 miles. So to come from Gloucester to here, 60 miles in my car this morning, that took me 1 hour, 7 minutes in a car, driving at 70 miles an hour. I was in cruise control, okay? 70 miles an hour. It took me 1 hour, 7 minutes to do 60 miles in a car. Imagine if you'd have invited me to here today and said, oh, by the way, John, you're walking. Okay. I'd have had to set off at like Thursday to get here. So when you read the Bible, it's really, if we're not careful, we read Jesus like a fairy tale. Jesus floated to Jerusalem, carried by the angels to Jerusalem, hovered to Jerusalem. No, he walked. Now, if you're going to do all that walking all over the country, you've got to be pretty fit. And yet our world sees Jesus as a bit of a wimp, bit of a physical wimp, and yet Jesus is incredibly strong. So that's an important issue. And part of your growth is your physicality, taking your body seriously. That's part of your spirituality, to look after yourself physically, because your physicality will carry your purpose to your world. If your body breaks, it's more difficult to do the purpose of God. Not impossible, but more difficult. Okay? He grew in favor with God. We could call that spiritual quotient. He literally learned to know the voice of God. In the passage we read, it says, didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house? Now, some versions have Father's house. Some versions of the Gospels have Father's business. The reason for the difference is because the literal translation would be, didn't you know I had to be in my Father's? So in the text of Luke, there's no house or business. What the translators have done, have put that in because it sort of makes a bit better sense. So Jesus is in the temple, Father's house, or Jesus is doing what the Father wants, his business. So the translators have put that in to try and help me and you understand what Jesus is saying. But what Jesus is saying is this: I had to be in my Father's. So even at 12, just about to become a man in Jewish culture, because they went from 12 to 13, at that point they became men. There were no teenagers in the first century, just children and adults. Amazing idea. I like that idea. Having raised 3 kids, I like the idea of going straight to adulthood. I do. I like it. So actually, Jesus grows in his understanding of God. He learns to know the voice of the Father. He learns to pray. He learns to know what the Father wants for him. What an amazing idea. And then lastly, he grows in favor with men, his emotional quotient. If you just read the Gospels and don't just look for the miracles, but look at how Jesus treats people. His emotional intelligence is off the scale. He treats people really well. He knows how to behave in different moments, in different contexts. One minute he can be speaking to a religious person, the next minute he's speaking to a prostitute, and he manages to do both pretty well. Now, the lazy answer to that is because he's God, right? The looking answer to that is because he learned how to work with people. I like that answer better. Yes? So actually, Jesus grows in these 4 areas, and it's pretty profound. So let me say this by way of help. It's next slide for me, Joshua. And I want you to see this. We do not learn as Christians in order to know. That's not the goal of our learning, to know something. We learn in order to grow. So all our knowing is about growing. So God is not impressed by what we know, the facts we know. God is impressed by what we know and do. Yes? That's a really important idea. So the Bible teaches us that what you do is what you really believe. All right? Not what you say you believe. Lots of people believe they believe a lot of things. Yeah. But when you do it, that's the evidence to the world around you. I believe this. All right? And that's a strong Bible view idea. And so when God wants us to grow, it's not just to accumulate knowledge and know facts about the Bible, but rather it's knowing truth that then helps us to grow, to be more like Him, or to do the things He wants us to do. All right? So I'm a Liverpool supporter, right? Big derby game tomorrow. We're playing Everton. Now, Liverpool is the first score I look for on a Saturday if we're playing on Saturday. We're playing on Sunday tomorrow. But it's the first score I look for. I've supported Liverpool since 1974. Okay? I'm that old. And so I've supported them since then. Now here's the reality. I have Liverpool shirts at home. I've got a Liverpool tracksuit top. They are my team. I follow them even on Twitter and social media. It's very, very sad. I've got all of that going on. But I never go to a match. I'm not a season ticket holder. And even the football shirts I have, someone else bought me them. Okay, they were bought as presents. Now, if you took my iPad and looked at my calendar, and I allowed you to look at my bank statements for the last 3 months, or even the last 6 months, by looking at my bank statements and looking at my calendar, you could not tell who I support. Which means I don't really support them. I think I do. Now, I follow them in that they are my team, and all right? But I don't support them because none of my time, none of my money, none of my energy is going into that. Now, what that really means is I don't support them. Are you with me? And the same idea can be applied to spirituality if we're not careful. Actually, I meet a lot of people over the years who believe things. They say stuff, and then I watch them. You don't believe that at all. Your behavior is not lining up with your words. Yes? And that's an important part of our growth as leaders. We don't just want to be people who believe through our words. We want to be people who believe through our lifestyle. So we're actually modeling something to the world around. We're not just telling people what to do. We're showing people what to do. Being a parent, that's been the number one lesson I've learned. You know, when your children are very, very young, you can tell them because you're the boss. I'm big, you're small. I'm in charge, you're not. You know, I hold all the power. When they get older, you have to negotiate with them. At least in our world anyway. Maybe not in yours, but in our world, we have to negotiate. So it's a new experience for me, negotiating with a 16-year-old. And one of the things I've discovered with my kids is this: if my words don't match my actions, they call it. Now, we've empowered them to do that, all right? We've allowed them to say that to us. So you may or may not agree with that. But actually, there have been times I've challenged my daughter to do something, and she said, "But Dad, you don't do that?" Ouch. Okay? Now, that's a leadership and growth issue. We're not in the business of just telling people what to do. That's not our job. Our job is to show people what to do, to lead them. All right? And that's part of our growth. So what Jesus is going through here is that He's learning, growing. He's developing in these 4 key areas, but it's manifesting itself in an authentic lifestyle. So in other words, what he's doing is what he believes. He's not saying anything that he doesn't actually follow through. Does that make sense? Okay. So next slide for me, please, Joshua. Now, I want you to notice this before I just wrap this up with a bit of practical advice for you. Because the reason I'm spending the time on this is because I want to establish a theological idea for you. As Christians, everything starts with theology. So we don't just start with an idea, we start with a reason. Here's why we do what we do. So I have a very committed growth development program in my own life. The reason for that is because I'm absolutely convinced of passages like Luke 2:52. So I do it because I have a theology that gives it to me. I have a reason for doing it. So that when you're not looking, I still do it. All right? When the lights go off, I still do this. And we do it because we really believe it. So let me show you this. Next click for me, Joshua. And it says this, that Jesus went down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. Now, again, another little piece of detail that's easy to miss. Joshua, could you just put the next click on for me? I'll show you a little map. Hopefully you can see that. So the green circle is Jerusalem. The sort of more purpley circle is Nazareth. Jerusalem's in the south. That's where all the money is. That's where the power is. That's where the big Bible schools are. In the north, it's little Jewish community surrounded by Gentiles. So the south has a sort of a very poor view of the north. In fact, there's a phrase that happens in the days of Jesus. Can anything that's good come out of Galilee? All right? And Galilee is where Jesus grew up. So there's this sort of look down your nose mentality from the south to the north. And that's where Jesus grew up. Now, let me just show you something about Nazareth. Nazareth was so small in the days of Jesus, it was so small that it wasn't on the map of its day. So we reckon because of research that less than 300 people lived in Nazareth at the time of Jesus. I've been to they are excavating parts of the city of Nazareth now, and they've rebuilt a mock version of the synagogue that Jesus would have studied in. And in Luke 4, when he says, the Spirit of the Lord is on me. You know that passage, that famous passage where Jesus says, the Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me too? Well, that synagogue where that passage was read is less than a third of the size of this building. Tiny little synagogue. Because it's a tiny little village. So Jesus lived in a tiny little village that wasn't even on the map of the day. If you went back to the first century in a time machine and Googled Nazareth, Google couldn't find it, okay? It wasn't on the map. Yet, Jesus grew there. And I meet an awful lot of people, and they try to say to me, well, the reason I'm not growing so much is because of the world I live in. It's because of this, because of that, because of the other, because of my postcode. Now, I'm not discounting any of that. I'm not minimizing any of that. But here's what Dr. Luke teaches us about Jesus. Not only did Jesus grow intentionally and deliberately, but he grew in a place where he had no right to succeed. He didn't grow in the best Bible schools. He didn't grow in the big city where all the money was. He didn't grow in the house of an important politician or a top business person. He grew up in a village that was so small that nobody ever wanted to go there. In fact, the reason that Mary and Joseph lived there was because it was so small. They wanted to get away from Herod. So they wanted to hide Jesus in that village. All right? That's why he lived there. And yet Jesus grew in a village without a postcode. Now, here's the lesson I want you to get. Growing is a decision. And there are, because I listened to your introductions, there are people as young as 16, 15, 16 in this room. Listen, I want to get this to you. If you get this, it can change the rest of your life. I appreciate there are people in this room, and some of you are growing because your parents want you to grow, or you're in a certain context because that's what you've been encouraged to. I get all of that. But if you can get for yourself that growth is a decision that we make, it will change the rest of your life. So you can be in a top-class university, getting top-class education and being numpty. You can be surrounded by brilliance and check out. Or you can be in a school that's nowhere on the league tables and excel. Because it's down to a decision you're making. And you know, people often will look at me, my own children did it, and they sort of look at the bit you've arrived at, and they don't really look at your journey. I love looking at people's journey. I love to know not just where they've arrived, I love to know how they got here. That's the stuff that rings my bell, fills my tank. I love to hear people's stories. And I took my children back to where I grew up, and they couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe the area I grew up in, Belfast, and how rough it was and nasty it was and bad it was. Yeah. The school that I was educated in was edgy and nasty and lots of bad things happening in it. And a world that ironically, I wouldn't want my own children growing up in. Yet that was my world. And growth is less to do with what's around you and more to do with what's inside you. That's a Bible view idea. Bible says, greater is the one that's in you than the one who's opposing you, the one who's against you. And that's a Bible idea. The Bible idea is we move from the inside out. It's the environment of your world that dictates to the environment of your world. It's not the postcode you live in that determines your future. It's the decisions we make in God that determine your future. Amen? And actually, as leaders, we want to grab that idea. We want to understand that idea. You know, the little church I grew up in really, honestly, wasn't very good. It didn't give me some of the things that you're getting today. I never had stuff like this. I never got opportunity, never went on a mission trip, was never encouraged to really go for it. If it hadn't have been for one or two people who took an interest in me, you know, I'd have probably just sat on the fringe. But actually, even in that little church, I found God in the Bible. I dug in. I learned to grow, even in an environment that wasn't very good. Now that's leadership. Because there will be days when it sucks. There will be days when it's not good. There will be days when it's not coming together. Those are the days we still make a decision. Let's grow. Let's grow. Come on, let's grow. And there would have been days that Jesus got up in Nazareth, little backwater village, and he gave his best. He did his best. And I want to show you this before I conclude. Can you just click on for me? Josh, you're doing a great job. Where did Jesus get so smart? Just next click for me. I want you to see that he excelled in the ordinary. Jesus learned to do ordinary well. My daughter got up to go to work today at Toys R Us, and she wasn't desperately enthusiastic. You know, she likes the idea of money. You know, didn't like the idea of work. Do you know what I mean? Now, I'm being a bit hard on her, but actually, do you know, she got paid yesterday and she was raving about, Dad, look at the money in my account, that's amazing. And then she has to get up this morning to go to work. All right? Now, darling, the reason you got paid is because you worked. Okay? The two things are connected. Now, what I'm trying to instill into her is when you go to Toys R Us today, you serve Toys R Us with the same energy and passion as you will serve the children in the children's ministry on Sunday. Now, you very rarely get an overwhelming amen in any audience when you say something like that. Paul controversially says to a group of slaves, serve your master as if you're serving the Lord. Now, there's a contextual reason for that comment. It's controversial, but it's actually also radical, socially radical idea. He also says, masters, look after your servants as if they were members of your household. That's a socially radical idea. So you have to hear the two things together. But I love this. Paul says to my daughter, go to Toys R Us and serve like you're serving the purpose of God in your life. Now, is she going to be in Toys R Us for the rest of her life? No. Is that the purpose of her life? No. Is that the call on her? No. Does she have other passions? Yes. But here's what I'm trying to teach her. If she faffs around at Toys R Us, why should God trust her with people? If you can't stack toys, why should God trust you with people? Come on. Come on. It's better than that. Okay? And I get this all the time. I mean, people, and they want a shortcut learning, excelling in the ordinary because they want to get to the Instagram. Hey, I want to do that. Absolutely, you'll get to do that. But first I need you to clean the toilets. I need you to sweep the car park. We need the snow cleared. Any volunteers? See, what we don't recognize about Jesus is we see Jesus on the mountain preaching to thousands of people. What we don't see him doing is getting up every day, going to work, and putting food on the table for his family. That's what he did. In the ordinary. Second click for me, Joshua. Keep going. Those hasn't quite come out the way I'd planned it, but he embraced responsibility. Jesus was known in his village as a tecton, as a carpenter. He wasn't known as a rabbi. He was known as a carpenter. What that means is he was known as the young man who looked after his family. He was known as the man who was very good at the craft he was committed to. So actually, that says something of Jesus and his growth within that. Next one, I don't think we're going to get these on because they've changed. He discovered his destiny in that time. By the time he's 30, he understands the purpose of God for his life. I know I joked about it earlier on, but can I say this to you? Many of you are working with young people and young adults and children. I absolutely hate the idea that this concept in the Western world that the teenage years are years to waste. I mean, I hate that. These are some of the most powerful growing years of your life. And actually, here's what I've discovered in the churches I've led. In the last ministry context I was in Rotherham, the average age of our worship team was 17. The average age of our media team was 14. Now we had people older than that serving, but the point is this. Here's what we discovered. If you thrust responsibility on young people, they generally rise to it. They will. But here's what I've discovered. If I treat young people like they can't do it, they won't. Yeah? But if I give responsibility, they'll grow. They'll take a hold of it. They'll do it. And actually to encourage people to take hold of that. And this is this idea. You can, the young people you're leading at 12, 13, and 14 can discover the purpose of God for their life. Don't have to wait till they're 30 and 40 and 50. They can discover it now. And actually, as leaders of those young people, you're encouraging them, this is the time when we can discover God's will, God's work, because that's where Jesus discovered his purpose. And our equivalent is a teenager. Now, he wasn't a teenager because he didn't have them then, but he discovered the purpose of God in his teens. Yes? And then the last one is this, which we're touching on now. It might not, it does fit in amazingly. He grew deliberately. Next click for me, Joshua. We're nearly there, and then we'll have a break, okay? 18-year gap in the life of Jesus. Dr. Luke tells us he grew. And the thing I want to encourage you with as leaders is that there are always gaps between where God's going to take you and where you currently are. There's always a journey. There's always a gap. So I got up this morning, put in my sat-nav to get me to here. This is what I want to do. It's what I love to do. I want to spend a day with you guys and hopefully learn with you and maybe inspire you a little bit to grow in God. But in order to get to the highlight, the moment I love, I've had to make a pretty boring journey. The M5, it's not that exciting. Yes? So cruise control, driving the car, listening to my sat-nav telling me where to go. It's not that exciting. But if I want to get to the exciting bit of the day, I've got to learn to do the boring bit. and here's what I've discovered. Most of your life is made up of boring bits. Okay, obviously not for you. So for other people. So I'll not use the word boring. I'll use the word mundane. Studying is mundane. Yep. Tidying your room is mundane. Cooking at home is mundane. Paying the bills, mundane. Turning up for classes on time, it's mundane. Yep, not exciting. That's not the stuff you're going to put on Instagram. You're not going to pause, arrived at class on time, click. I'm not going to, because nobody cares, right? But yet, it's the mundane routine stuff that makes up all the bits that get you to the exciting stuff, apparently. You know, the so-called exciting stuff, the stuff you want to do, right? And so here's Jesus in the Jordan, Holy Spirit's come, Father speaking. He's about to crack into 3.5 years of miracle-laden ministry, and everybody forgets the boring, mundane, routine years that have just passed. Yet, it's what he did in the 18 years that set him up for this moment. And it's such an incredible life principle. And I know sometimes when I talk like this, it sounds like, I'm just talking as an older person, sort of looking at life. But actually, I so want to encourage my own children and young people to get this. Because if you grab this idea, it will empower the mundane. The mundane becomes important. The routine stuff that's sort of all a bit boring becomes important. Why? Because every moment is an investment into the next moment. Your actions today are a prophecy of your tomorrow. So if I'm messing about today, then tomorrow I'm going to sort of harvest messing about stuff. Right? But if I take today seriously at some measure, tomorrow, all things being equal, tomorrow I'll harvest some good stuff. We don't harvest success in the absence of process and hard work. Is that okay? You with me? Let me show you this picture. And this is one of the greatest days of my life. This is my daughter, Elena, walking her down the aisle a couple of years ago. And it's an amazing moment. We had a fantastic photographer. First time I met the photographer was on the wedding day. Elena had organized everything. She's a fantastic sort of leader, organizer type person. So I just turned up. I was like the dad, and I just turned up, quite literally. She had organized everything. She was amazing. And she got this photographer. The first time I met him, I thought, do you know how to do this? Do you know when you meet someone and you think, has she done good here or not? And he seemed a bit like out of it, has to be said. He was a bit spaced out a little bit. And I was a bit worried about, are these photographs going to come out? He was amazing. He was absolutely amazing. And he just roved around the place and he took all these different pictures that weren't posy pictures. They were natural pictures. This is one of my favorite pictures of the day. Don't know if you can see it, but I'm looking away because I'm just about to hand her over. Yes? She's looking at him in that way. Okay? And he's looking at her, right? It's an amazing moment. It's literally a tipping point moment. It's a handover moment. Now, when I walked her up the aisle, it was an incredible experience because everyone, when the doors opened, everyone looked at her. They were all saying, oh, you're gorgeous, you're beautiful. There was just emotion and love. It was everything that I hoped it would be for her. It was just stunning. She looked amazing. She's a very popular, vivacious, gorgeous girl. And everybody sort of loves her. She's that sort of a girl. And so there was just this outpouring, this tsunami of love. Oh, Elena, she's gorgeous. Oh. Well, I'm trying not to cry as I'm walking her up the aisle. And everybody's looking at that moment, and rightly so. But what they don't realize that moment was created over 22 years, 3 months, and 16 days. That picture is 22 years, 3 months, and 16 days investment. Looks great in the album, right? But you weren't there when we were potty training her. You weren't there when she was throwing a tantrum. when she didn't want to go to school, when she thought I was the worst dad in the universe. You weren't there. Neither was everybody else in that room. All they see is that. Wow, gorgeous, beautiful, amazing, stunning. And she is, all of those things. But 22 years investment went into that moment. And there's a spiritual principle. Next slide for me, Joshua. And it's this principle. Jesus lived well in the chronos moments, the ticking of the clock moments, which meant he was ready for the kairos moment. Sorry, that hasn't come out quite right. So in other words, he's ready for God's moment because he lived and grew in the ordinary moments. Now, can I encourage you? I don't want to discourage you. I want to encourage you as young people. Most of your life will be made up of ordinary moments. But it's what we invest into the ordinary moments will determine the special moments. Yeah? Some of you want to be great preachers, and you'll stand up one day in front of thousands of people. But before you learn to stand up in front of thousands, you need to be able to invest into the ones and the twos. And if you don't want to show up for that group you're leading, those three young people, then actually the chances of standing in that stage may not happen. Because it's the ordinary moments. And can I just say this? For me, the ordinary moments are the hardest. I love this sort of moment. Whether I'm good at it or not is another conversation. But I love these sorts of moments. I don't need to get energized for this. This is what I love to do. It's cutting my grass. I need to get energized for it. It's washing my car. It's picking up the poo from the dogs when I take them out for a walk. I don't want to do that. But I have to do that. That's all part of my world and my life. It's sitting with my children when they're crying, when I just want to do something. Do you understand? It's the ordinary moments that make up the extraordinary moments. And that's what I want to give to you. So let me close with this, and we are done. So I've taken more or less my full hour now. So next slide for me, Joshua. So what does this mean for us? Well, I want to encourage you to create for your growth an elephant plan. Okay? There's a phrase, I don't know if it's just an English phrase in our context or where it originates from. I've tried to find out and I can't find it. But the saying goes, how do you eat an elephant? You eat an elephant one bite at a time. Okay? So when it comes to growing and creating a development plan, we've got to think about one step at a time. All right? Now, as human beings, we want to leap. We want to move as fast as we can. We don't, all right? But actually, the way we're designed, you've got to take a step at a time. Now, it might be my steps are big compared to somebody else, but most of life is made up of one step at a time. When it comes to our spiritual growth, have a one step at a time mentality. We do what we can. God will do what He can. Next slide for me, Joshua. And I want to encourage you, create an elephant plan that has a clear purpose. So Jesus has a purpose to grow, so He grows towards that purpose. So some of you are in university, right? Your purpose is to get through, you're studying for that degree. Listen, get the degree. All right? Well, the call of God's on my life, brilliant. But get the degree. You're in university now, so that's your goal. Let's do this. So we create a plan, we establish a purpose. There may be a greater purpose beyond that, but establish a sense of purpose. Because here's what I've discovered. When I give myself a reason to grow, it's easier to grow. Okay? Next slide for me, Joshua. Let's keep clicking. Design a practical plan. I'll show you an idea of how to do that now. I meet lots of people and they want to get somewhere, but they don't quite know how to get there. So designing a practical plan can actually help us. Next slide. Make your plan attainable. So sometimes when I'm dealing with young people, they want to read the Bible, and so I'll say things like, okay, let's try and design you a plan to read the Bible every day. And I said, well, how much do you think you could read? 12 chapters a day. And I go, no, let's not do that. Let's pull that back. No, I can do that, John. Pastor, I could do that. Yeah, you might be able to do it, but let's dial it down and we'll build it up. All right? So let's start small and we'll go big. rather than starting big. Because actually the plan you have has to be something you can actually do, has to be attainable. And sometimes in our spiritual plan, we set a target that we're never going to reach, and therefore it discourages us from doing it. So set a simple plan, an attainable plan. Next slide for me, Joshua. Keep clicking. Make sure your plan is sustainable. It's something you can keep doing. So some of you are in uni, some of you are in college, some of you are in work, and you're also doing ministry. So you need a plan of growth that is sustainable, that you can actually keep doing, not just do it one day and then not be able to do it the next day. So let me show you some ideas that may be able to help you. Next slide for me. We're almost there. Set some short-term targets, and I'll show you how to do that now. Because I love short-term targets, because when you hit them, you feel encouraged and inspired by them. So keep going for me, Joshua. There should be another one. And with the short-term target, regular accountability. So here's the beauty of setting a short-term target. You can actually see when you hit it, so you hold yourself accountable to it. I have a Garmin, which helps me with my physical activity. And it's amazing. My target every day is 13,000 steps. The government encourages you to do 10,000 steps, and I'm trying to hit 13. And I can have a day like this where I've been on my feet all day and I go, I must have done loads of steps. And then you swish it down, and I've only done 5,000. Now, in my brain, it feels like I've done millions. But my accountability is telling me I haven't done that. That's why we need accountability, because our brain messes with us, and it tells us we're doing better than we are. So those short-term targets help to become little accountability markers that say, did I do what I said I would do? And if I haven't done it, okay, can I do it? So here we go. And then we're finished. We'll give you a break. So next bit. If I wanted to grow in these 4 areas, what would this look like? How could I make this work? And I'm sort of jumping to the end game here. So next click for me. So wisdom. I want to grow in wisdom. What would that look like for me? Well, as a follower of Jesus, it might mean reading a good book from cover to cover properly, maybe once every 2 months. Now, I know some of you are reading lots of books for studies, but I'm talking now about a growth book. Now, people look at that and go, 1 book every 2 months, that's not very much. If you're reading a proper book cover to cover once a month, you're in the Premier League of book readers. I'm telling you. Just, if you don't think that's a lot, ask your friends how many books they read. Like proper books. I'm not talking about like novelty books. I'm talking about proper growth books. How many books they read a year, or books you'll be shocked. And actually, to give yourself a target, I'm going to read 6 really great Christian growth books over a year. That's my target. That's my goal, to grow my wisdom. Added to that, you might want to listen to a podcast, maybe of a good preacher or a good teacher, and then maybe meet with a wise person. If you know anybody in your world that's wise in a certain area of growth, meet with them and ask them questions and say, how do you do this as a Christian? How do I do this as a leader? How can I grow? Second area of stature, just click that on for me. 20-minute power walk 3 times a week. Everybody could do that, even in this room. I know for some of us, physical activity, we don't like the idea of it, but everybody could do that. And then the challenge of reducing fast food or junk food to once a week. Now, people say, well, I don't need to do this, but if you're serious about growing your physicality, then we want to actually improve our health. So, when you're 21, when you're 16, when you're 17, you're invincible, you're immortal. You can eat anything, and it just doesn't affect you. When you get to my age, 51, everything affects you. But here's what I've learned. If I take that seriously earlier, I'm looking after myself. So what you're putting into your mouth is important. It's really important. And how you're looking after your body is important, because some of you have the call of God on your life, and it's your body that's going to help you get there. All right? So that's just some ideas. Favor with God, quickly. And we're done. Trying to read a chapter of the New Testament a day. Do you know, if you read 1 chapter of the New Testament per day, you will read the New Testament 1.5 times every year. And I meet many, many Christians that have never read the Bible cover to cover. They've never actually read every part of the Bible. Now, as a leader, as a follower of Jesus, I want to encourage you to read every bit of the Bible as soon as we can. All right? And this is one way to do it. I will read a chapter of the New Testament every single day. Sunshine, snowing, holiday, whatever, I'm going to do that. Yes? And there's a little, I don't know if you've come across SOAP. When you read the Bible, it was designed by Wayne Cordeiro, and SOAP stands for Scripture, Observation, Application, and Prayer. So the idea is you read a scripture, what observation, what does it say? Application, what do I need to do? And then pray that through. And it turns then the passage into an everyday experience for you. It moves it into your practical experience. And then identify a key area where God needs to be at the center of your world. That's a way that we can honor God. Well, I love Jesus, but if Jesus has no hold over my money, then I don't love him. Well, I love Jesus, but what I watch on TV is my business. Well, I love Jesus, but... So if Jesus is the center of my world, then it means he's the boss of that stuff. Right? So me and you are moving him to the center of that. Last thing, and then I will shut up and give you a break. And it's this: growing in favor with men. Make time for good friends, maybe once or twice a month. Just make time for people. We're all busy. We're all busy serving. We're all busy doing. And sometimes we're so busy serving people, we're not spending time with people. And so that helps us to grow. And then place yourself in a socially uncomfortable position with others. What I mean by that is, don't just go into the world, the parts of the world that you're comfortable with. One of the ways that will help you grow emotionally is that you expose yourself to areas that are not comfortable for you. And actually, I put myself in positions where I'd rather not be. That will help us grow as people. So that's just a bit of an idea of the 4 areas that you can grow in. But let me conclude with this. Growth is a decision. And as leaders, you're modeling growth. It's important for you, if you're leading others, you're growing yourself. It's important that if I'm teaching other people from the Bible, I'm learning from the Bible. It's important if I'm helping other people to make a journey, it's important that I'm making that journey too. There's a difference, and I'll conclude with this idea, between a travel agent and a tour guide. A travel agent tells people where to go. A tour guide takes people to where they've been. And great leadership is not about pointing people in the direction. Great leadership is about showing people where to go. Even if you're just one step ahead of them, it's about showing them where to go. And the greatest gift you could give to the young people or the people that you are leading is a lifestyle committed to growth in the ordinary, routine parts of your world. Is that okay? Does that make sense? All right then.